So moving on, Don is going to be covering 2016 responsive and usability trends. Don, you still there?
I am still here.
Nap time.
I'm hydrated.
That's right. But Don, I get this question a lot at EY about best practices with responsive. Is it set? Is it evolving? Same with usability, and I'm sure you're going to cover that. But just speak in general about what we can expect in this next chapter.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that is always evolving. I mean, I'd love to say that, yeah, we've got it nailed down and this is perfect, and it comes down to what users expect, what we're capable of delivering, change over time. Something we built 5 years ago versus 3 years ago versus what we're going to build next year is going to be different because there's a constantly evolving technology, capabilities, and what users expect and how you use the combination to obviously drive sales. So it's always a changing target. So rolling right in. Unless you got something else you want to bring up, Eric, I'll get back on the
going. You're doing great.
Okay.
Keep it going.
And the stuff I'm going to talk about here, and as we go into some examples, the title is Responsive and Usability Trends, and some of these are not, I will say, some of them may not even be trends yet, but I think they're things that people should be looking at doing or at least analyzing. Whether it's a trend, because there's a lot of stuff, we'll show some examples here that are from large retailers that aren't doing these things, but I think they're things you have to think about and you should be thinking about as you're rolling it out. Just starting with section pages, and that's where a lot of people spend a lot of time, and I think there's a lot of lost opportunity in making a site more usable. Just looking at our options for pagination. You've got a store, you've got a lot of products in a section. There's always a debate. Do I paginate? Do I not paginate? There's a couple different choices here. We've got a view more option. Actually, we'll have you roll out the next bullet and screenshot to even show, versus pagination. And there's even an endless scroll. We didn't do an example of that. But looking at the three choices, a lot of things lately, at least in usability studies that I've seen, have seen a lot of benefits for actually doing, instead of a pagination, doing a view more. This doesn't always apply, but instead of basically making it so you've got these paginated numbers to click on, where you actually put your first page of products in theory, and then at the bottom you would have a view more button that you click, and then it just immediately shows a next set of products down below that. There's good and bad in every option. Actually, let's keep going back. Go back. I'm not quite done yet. On these, the pagination certainly is what people are used to in a lot of ways. Having sorting and things like this, which you can still have with the view more option. But you'll find there's different usability benefits, and just view more has got a lot of ways to make comparison a lot easier. Pagination still can work well. Just making sure you get the right data in there. I put endless scroll on here because it is a choice. I did not put a picture of it because I would never do it. There's been a lot of stores, or some stores that have done this and found it immediately reduces sales because people just scroll and scroll and scroll forever. Whereas either view more or pagination options let a user focus on one page of products and have a stopping point. It actually lets them focus more on that first set of products to drive them through and make them make a choice faster. So you want to think about it, that there are options. Just don't do the endless scroll, please. That's my personal opinion. So now going on to the next page. Looking at quick view. This is something that a lot of stores have got. It's sort of the trend that are there. I would tend to say really think about A, whether you want a quick view, and B, how you implement the quick view. A lot of them do, like this has got a little screenshot where the quick view icon shows in the middle of the image. I'm actually not really fond of that anymore. There are studies that have shown that some people will actually click on that because they're mousing over really quickly and they click, and they don't actually realize, I understand most of us realize as retailers, that they've gone to a quick view screen. And so when they see a quick view screen like this one on the right, you notice that doesn't really have a whole lot more than the section showed already. I mean, I can still favorite it. yeah, I can see the SKU and availability and a quantity box, and that's really all I've gained in the quick view. And so my concern on this is there are some users that would actually see the quick view, not see the or view details down at the bottom down there, and so they immediately think, this is all I got, this is all the info I have, and so now you've lost them. So in some cases like this, if you can't provide good info and make it really obvious that there's more details somewhere else, I actually prefer to not have the quick view, or have the quick view button not be dead center of the image. Put it at the top, put it at the below, something else, somewhere else, so they won't accidentally click that, and it makes it easier to get to the product. Because I know as a user myself, if I'm clicking on that image and I want to get to the product, I get annoyed sometimes when that quick view pops up right in the middle. It can be still useful, but I'm just saying, just think about what you're doing to make sure from a user perspective, if they don't know your site and they're quickly going somewhere, they know clearly where they're going at all times. Now moving
before
on.
we move on, I think it's worth pointing out, we have a question here in just a second too,
Sure.
but I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of platforms have the quick view enabled as a standard feature. I know at EY Studios, particularly with BigCommerce, we've seen a lot of people kind of opt out for that, whether it's merchants that are just kind of tired of it. They've seen it not be really used effectively in the store they already had or whatnot. But the question we have here is, could quick view negatively impact page load? What's your take on that, Don?
It depends on, honestly, how it's implemented. By nature, in most implementations, it should not make a big change in the page load. I'd have to see the specific implementation because it's just some extra data. Like in this case, I'm looking here at this example we've got here. In theory, at least how I would build this would make very little to no change in the page load. Does it make no change? I won't say no. It makes a very, very minimal change. But I can't say that there couldn't be a way that, depending on what data you're bringing in, that it could make a larger implementation problem. It's all going to depend on your developer and how they're building it out. I'd have to see it in specific to say, but it does not need to does not need to impact the page load.
Okay, very good. Well, let's move on. Yes, sir.
No problem. Once again, still looking at section pages. We've got examples here. Once again, this is our view more versus our pagination. But also, when looking at these lists, do you want a list view versus a grid view? I've seen studies that basically say, first off, most people do, when they have the option to switch, they don't. As a rule, people do not switch back and forth, except if they find they do not get the information they want in one view or the other. As a rule, list views work well, like this example on the left, when you have details. Usually it's more technical in nature. There's more information that the person needs to compare products side by side. And so the list view works well for that because you have more room to display that information. Grid view works really well when you're looking at something that is more visual. It could be a home decor, it could be a lot of clothing and apparel type stuff. Every product's going to be different, and there may not be a perfect answer for you. But if you don't have good detailed information to show in that list view, don't even be showing it, or at least not initially. We've also seen cases. There was one case, a study I saw, where a mobile site, they went with a grid view, but they had nothing except the product image, no price, no name, no nothing in the grid view. And I'm all for minimal grid views, but that's a little too minimal. And so they found people kept switching over to the other view just so they could see the product price and name, which to me looks at it as a usability issue because you've now made it harder for people to find what they need. And actually, if you roll on to the next slide here.
John, before we do,
yeah.
I want to bring JT in on this as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned mobile, and I'm thinking about the number of thumbnails available on mobile. JT, we've talked about this too. Whether you show one big thumbnail you scroll through, or a maximum of two. I don't think you can realistically fit 3 thumbnails on a mobile. But what are you seeing in terms of trends there, JT?
I've kind of seen it both ways. I think it kind of goes back to, what what the product offering is. You know, there's some things that are going to require a little bit more detail. So, you know, in that instance, I'd recommend just showing
bigger image.
Yeah, bigger image. You know, but if it's like computer parts or something like that, where you're not necessarily interested as much in the product image as you are the title,
Good point.
you know, I can see doing the two across.
That's a good point. Yeah, if you've got really visual products, I think also the quantity, right? I mean, if you've got 50 products on a page, then you're not going to scroll it one by one on your mobile device. Do you agree, Don?
I totally agree. I mean, I think in large part depends on those products. You know, if it's very visual, then bigger images are always better. And if it's not, you know, yeah, if I'm buying, you know, tires for my car or something like this, there's nothing visually I'm going to look at to a large extent. So that's, you know, I don't need that big image.
Right. Okay.
Totally agree. The other thing that I have not seen as much of, we've done some sites with it, and there's more and more, really has to do, once again, with section pages. I'm doing a lot of this on section pages because that's where you get a lot of variation. And this has to do with progressive disclosure. It really comes down to you want to take your section page, try to cut out a lot of the repetitive info on it to try to get, you can show more products, you can give a little more white space. And then the progressive disclosure is basically like for a desktop, it doesn't really work on a mobile, where a user can mouse over something and actually see more details and more information. So it's sort of the benefit of like a quick view with more information, but without having to actually, you know, click on something or whatever. They can just sort of mouse over and see. And the box expands in this example. It shows you the width. You know, it shows you more information. You still have to show the basic information. Obviously, image, name, price is critical. But things like the order button and whatnot does not need to all be on every single item. You end up with this page that's filled with all these repetitive elements. One example I saw on one site, which was just laughable, was they had badges for, you know, available in store and available online, and they had on the section every single item under it said available online. And I'm like, well, I'm sort of on your site. I'm sort of assuming it's available online. And so that's a bunch of wasted space there, clutter on the page, making it even busier for something that's really not needed. And you could add that if you want when they mouse over. You can also add what I've seen in a lot of cases. I don't have an example. I should have got an example of it, where you have extra images, either product, you know, you have like a lifestyle image, someone using the product, versus, you know, a standalone picture. It gives you a lot more room to do a lot more to make that section page a lot more usable to the user. And, you know, it's amazing how much there can be done that people just, you know, right now you just stick it in. And obviously doing progressive disclosure, being able to do filtering and whatnot, just tying back to what Scott was talking about, comes down to having that data, having that information in there so that you can pick out pieces and say, let's put this on the section page when they mouse over, or let's make this available all the time. So there's a lot of good stuff you can do. And like I said, I don't know if I would qualify even some of these as trends, but I think they're things that you really should be doing, or at least seriously thinking about if you can do, to try to make those pages more usable.